Well, welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Tanner O'Brien. I'm a senior partner here at Action Coach in Central Texas. Today, I'm sitting down with Nick Courtright, who is the owner of Atmosphere Press. So excited to be jumping in, having some conversation about this crazy thing we call entrepreneurship, business ownership, the ups and downs that can come along with it. So, Nick, I'm excited to have you here. Why don't we just start with a little bit of background? For the viewers, give us kind of the 10,000-foot view. What's your background and tell us about your business?
Yeah, so I am the founder and CEO of Atmosphere Press. We are a publishing company, book publishing, sort of on the author services side of things, doing editorial, cover design, layout design, publication, publicity, all this good stuff for authors. And we've been around since 2015. My background was actually, I'm an author myself, and I was a college professor for years. So that's what I was doing, teaching a lot of, literature classes, creative writing classes, and then slogging through a million freshman composition papers, and dealing with that. And it was just doing a little bit of writing coaching on the side, trying to help out some authors. And then I had this one author who said, "Hey, can you help me publish my book?" And that's how the first Atmosphere Press book happened. And then slowly but surely, it sort of grew and turned into this sort of larger thing. I eventually had to stop teaching because this was just, better to do this with my life instead. And we just recently published our 1,000th book.
Wow. That is fantastic. So what is that transition like to go from education and that whole world to I'm running a business now? Like what take me through that transition.
Yeah, it's really crazy because I never, envisioned myself as an entrepreneur. It's like you meet these people who are like, I knew when I was a child that I was going to go out there and sell lollipops on the playground for arbitrage pricing, like they just knew it all along. I never had that, like when I was in college, I was like, oh, I guess I'll be a poet, like that was what my original publishing stuff was. And I got a master's degree in creative writing, poetry. My PhD is in literary criticism. And, that was the sort of path that I was on. It was literature, it was philosophy, deep thought. Like none of it was like how to set up like a 401k share, for my employees, like that was not part of my educational trajectory. So it is interesting because I sort of went from a life of learning, in academia to sort of when I had exhausted all that by like getting a PhD, there was nowhere else to go educationally. I then completely shifted trajectories and changed into a completely different line of work where I was going to have to be educating myself like constantly, sort of all over again from the ground up. So it was a really interesting transition. Obviously, learned a lot along the way. Have gotten my bumps and bruises. Sort of coming up the learning curve. But it's been really exciting, and I think honestly, my not having a business background and not knowing about that actually really helped me build a better business because I was able to sort of be profitable from day one. Like
Mm.
right from the very start, it was like, if I'm going to do this work, I need there to be money coming out the other side, and a lot of people don't think about business that way, but it sort of helped us be a little bit like cleaner from the start, be more client focused from the start, be sort of more value driven and economical. And, even now, we've been around for 8 years. We've never taken a penny of investor money or loan money or anything like that, which might be crazy, but it's all sort of born of this sort of non-business background that I had.
Hmm. So take me through, it started in 2015. You're 8 years in now. What did the business look like in those first couple of years? What was your role in the business? How has that shifted? And where are you at today? How many team members are you up to? What does your role look like today compared to back in the early days when you were just getting this thing off the ground?
Yeah, well, back in the early days, it was your like small press, like one, person show kind of deal. Like I was doing the developmental editorial calls with authors. I was designing the interior. I was muddling my way through cover design. I was uploading the books to the distributor. I was doing everything, and it really was, a couple years in where I was like, what the real problem with trying to grow any business on the author service side of things is that I can only read so much,
Hmm.
right? So I was like, I needed editors, and that was sort of the first thing that I hired out. It's like I need people to actually like read the books and like help. So that was like the first thing that I stopped doing because it just wasn't sensible time wise. And then slowly but surely started hiring cover designers, hiring interior designers, hiring proofreaders, hiring. And now we have 45 people working on the team between, full timers and contractors. But even our contractors are all like long term people, so it's a very, very stable team of people, and they're really awesome. And it's been great sort of learning how to delegate, because that part's always a huge challenge. Just the amount of training labor that goes into delegation is something that a lot of people really have a hard time investing that time into the training necessary to have a team or have people do the things that you used to do as well as you do them. And in many cases now, far better than I was ever able to do them. So, in terms of what I do now, it's mostly I just carry all the stress, for everybody else so that they can just execute the task. I just worry. That's my primary role now. That and thinking about like marketing strategy, like product lines, like broad systemic changes in the way that we handle our processes, that's sort of like macro kind of stuff. But yeah, so it's a different role because I don't deal with authors directly anymore, but I'm still like there always, like every day, trying to make sure that everything runs smoothly and always sort of going on a circuit around the people on my team and being like, how can we make this better? How can we make this better? How can we make this better? And then trying to bring, systems thinking into, refining workflows and increasing efficiency and removing pain points and all of that kind of stuff.
I love it. So I imagine in that process, then there likely has been a shift in the like amount of time you have to dedicate to the business itself, whether it's working on it or in it. It sounds like a lot of what you did was being able to leverage your time in a more effective way. So have you seen a big drop off in the amount of hours that you need to put into the business on a regular basis?
It's interesting because the short answer is yes. Like I used to just work, insane amounts of hours. Like during the early days of the pandemic, there was like, we just got a huge influx of work because, we help authors and all of these people who were used to going on vacations and going out to eat and going to movies. Now they were stuck in their house and they had a passion project. This was one of the few things that they could invest in that was going to be to give them some fulfillment even while they were stuck in their houses, right? So I was doing, 7, 8 sales calls a day, like building stuff in between. Like it was an insane amount of work, 7 days a week. Now I don't have to do that anymore. I can, in theory, right now, I could just like stop working for a while, and things would probably mostly be okay. Eventually, the wheels would start coming off, right? Uh, but now it's mostly the vast majority of my time now is spent working on rather than working in.
Mm.
That it has been a major difference. But I have found that sort of with this sort of size of a business and like the number of clients that we're serving in these intimate, significant long-term relationships, like publishing a book doesn't happen like that. It's like it's this drawn out thing that there's still plenty of working on to do to, keep a schedule as full as you want it. And I tend to like mine pretty full.
I love that. So I want to just backtrack a little bit. So you had mentioned a little bit about delegation. I want to dive into it for a moment. For you, what was your experience actually moving into delegating more things? Was that a difficult transition for you? Was that pretty easy just to say, I have to figure it out, but like I'm okay with delegating? What was that like, I don't know, emotionally for you to go to that? And what are some tips that you would recommend to the audience based on your experience and your life lessons?
Yeah. So I would say just to start with the tip is just freaking do it. Like you've got to do it. It is emotional and because it's scary, it's like there's that famous entrepreneurship book, The E-Myth,
Mm.
and it's always talking about like the paranoia of like, you have your certain way that you want things to be, and you're going to be a control freak about your business, and then you bring somebody else in and you hope that they can do it 90% as well. Right. But you've got to do it. Right. Like the time investment of like trying to train them, coming up with documentation for your processes is like super laborious, and it can be difficult because you just sort of close your eyes and you like hope that they're okay, right, that they're
Mm.
like doing the job well, that they're not like taking their eye off the road, and sometimes they do and you're like, oh no, you've got to like rush in and try to patch things up, but it is a tricky thing delegating, but I think that it's the most important part really to you know, uh, having a real business as opposed to just being a solo practitioner. Like I have tons of friends that I know who like they have a little business that they're running. They've got some little side hustle, right? And a lot of them, there's like a lot of potential there for it to be something. But as long as they're the bottleneck, there's only so much they can do, right? At a certain point you've just got to hire, and you're going to take your lumps, but I think it's ultimately worth it. And then when those people start bringing their own things to the table, they are in some cases going to be better at it than you, and that's actually in my mind like a cause for pride.
Yeah, I like that. Um, Definitely an emotional thing, and I will 100% agree with you. It can be very laborious going through the process, especially if you're like just like, all right, it's in my head. How do I get it down on a piece of paper that somebody else can also follow it and do it at the same level? But it does make a big difference when you start freeing up some of that time and being able to focus on other areas in the business that you can have a big impact on. Um, so talking about the business, I want to talk a little bit about what makes your business so special. So I imagine there's other competitors out there. How do you differentiate? Why do your clients choose you versus any of the other competitors out there?
I think it really comes down to integrity, as like seemingly corny an answer as that is. But in this industry, in the publishing industry, especially on the, author services hybrid publishing side, there are a lot of bad actors out there. There are a lot of places that are going to just tell you whatever you want to hear. Oh, we're going to turn you into a New York Times bestseller. We're going to sell 1 million copies of your book. All your dreams are going to come true. All it costs is 20 grand. They're going to come out there, they're going to say that. So I think, and then on the other side, you get the traditional publishers who aren't going to answer your emails. They're not going to respond to you. Even if you get a deal with them, they might, take your rights to your own creative property away from
Mm.
you. There are just all these sort of grotesque practices in the industry. And I think from the very start, like from the first time I put together an Atmosphere website in 2015, I was like, we got these 5 principles like honesty, transparency, professionalism, kindness, and making your book awesome. Right? Like we just had these 5 things. And you see honesty, transparency, professionalism, and kindness. Those were the things where it was like, I just didn't see a lot of out there in the publishing world. So right from the very start, it was like, these are going to be our differentiators. Like there are all these bad practices going on. We're just not going to do those. And we're going to see what happens. And I feel like from the start, just putting ourselves out there like that drew in a different type of author who was, drawn to integrity. They were drawn to somebody who would say honesty and kindness, as opposed to just, we'll make your dreams come true with a bunch of lies. That it brought in a different type of person. And I feel like using those kind of as guiding principles and giving people a rewarding and meaningful experience and sort of listening to them and really trying to help them improve their work, all of that has made a difference, all the way through sort of as a mission in terms of how we hire people, how we train people, what our messaging is, how we communicate with the authors that we have, how responsive we are to them. And I feel like that's been a big differentiator for us over the years.
I like it. So let's put a bow on, this target audience or kind of like your best customer, which I think you've kind of hit on a little bit. I always like to frame it up with, if I'm in the audience and I'm listening to this later on, how would I know that I'm a really good fit to give you guys a call and potentially work with you? Or I might know somebody that I should be referring over to you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we tend to have a little bit of a literary slant, right? So, if you have written a book, right? That's the trickiest thing that we get in our field is we get lots of people who are like, I would love to work with you. And we're like, tell us about your book. And they're like, well, I'll write it someday, you know? Or, I've had the most interesting life story. It could be put on Netflix. You should write it down and like pay me for my story. And I'm like, man, you just have no idea how any of this works, right? I do feel like a big part of what we do is educational, just like helping explain to writers like how this industry actually works, how you can navigate it, how you can make a book work for you. But I'd say definitely people who have a passion as creators, right? People who have made something, right? People who want to be treated well, people who want to be heard, and people who want to have a true partner in the publishing process, not just something where it's like, oh, they'll publish my book and I'll never hear from them ever again. It is an intimate long-term relationship,
Mm.
right? And that's why we take that so importantly in our hiring, right? That we want people who are going to stick around, who are going to, give authors a good marriage, between publisher and author. So people who have that kind of mindset, I feel like are going to be really the best audience for us and the type of people who are going to hands down like truly benefit from working with us to make their book a really amazing thing for them and take that manuscript that they've spent many hours sort of typing away at, hacking away at, and now getting to see it turn into something really great by working with professionals.
Mm. So you mentioned a couple times now the importance of having the right people or hiring the right people for the team. Um, how would you describe your leadership style in business, and has it changed over the years as you've kind of grown through this 8-year journey into business?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's like something between common sense and laissez-faire. It's kind of a weird thing because I'm the oldest of 6 kids. That's part of my background. So in terms of my background, I'm the oldest of 6 kids. So I just always had to tell everyone what to do, right? And then I was a college professor where I was in front of a room telling everybody what to do, right? So I have this whole long sort of history of leadership right from an incredibly young age where I was sort of like had to be a leader. I had to sort of like guide people and make decisions for people. And now even if I'm like going out with friends or something like that, everybody just like is like, where are we going? And like they all look at me and I'm like, why? Like make up your own mind. So I feel like leading and sort of coming up with systems, coming up with plans, like having a model, making decisions, being decisive. I feel like all of that comes rather naturally to me. I don't have to try super hard
Hmm.
to do that. But I'm also not, I'm not a big extrovert. I'm not somebody who wants to go like shake everybody's hand and talk to everybody. And I also really believe in autonomy, right? So I can lead, I can give guidance, but I'm also not going to be in your business a lot. And I'm also going to try to instill trust that if you are working hard, if we're all pulling on the same side of the rope, I don't need to be bothering you a whole lot because I trust you to do it on your own. That's why I hired you. That's why you're here. And if you believe in our mission, you're going to want to do a good job without me bothering you.
Hmm.
So we're sort of as a company culture, we're 100% remote, you know? So we don't see each other a lot. I also don't conduct like a million meetings. We're not like, oh, we got to have our 17 meetings this week. Like we just don't do that. It's more sort of here's some guidance, now like you execute, you build systems that are going to like work for you. You work the hours that you want to work. Cause I really believe that people do often do some of their best work when you sort of get out of their face a little bit. So I'd say that's some of my leadership style historically. And I feel like a lot of that is still valid. uh it's interesting because sometimes you're like, I'll be like, should I be meaner, I kind of wonder about that. I watched that show like Succession,
Uh-huh.
and how like
Uh-huh.
horrible they are and how like completely cutthroat they are, and I'm like, maybe I should be more like that, and then I'm like, can't do it.
I love that. So I also have to imagine that over the course of the last 8 years, there's been a number of like lessons learned or kind of roadblocks that you've had to overcome, things like that. Are there any kind of moments that stand out to you that we can kind of chat through a little bit here on either a roadblock that you had to overcome or just like a lesson that you're like, I had to learn this in business in order to get to this next level?
Yeah, I think an interesting one is one that I've just been like learning sort of over the course of the last like couple years is sort of on the marketing side of things.
Mm.
Like marketing is like, I can't think of a more profane term, you know, as I've sort of like had to deal with it and like think about it. It's like, oh, marketing, it's like this like evil, wicked thing. And now I'm finally sort of coming to grips with the fact that, marketing as a roadblock is like, it's not just this magical thing where you're like, oh, I'm going to do some marketing. And then it's like, oh, the leads pour in, is that it's really uh, every single thing that you do. It's everything. It's every email that you write. It's every interaction with an existing customer. It's like every single thing on your website, every single ad that you run, every single outcome that a client achieves. Like all of that is marketing because it's not just about like new lead acquisition. It's referrals, it's repeat business, and that when you start to think about like marketing as being, sort of an extension of that, it does change the whole equation from like, marketing as being like part of your company to marketing being your company.
Mm.
And that I think that's like a hurdle that I am like actively tripping over like every day for the last year plus, trying to sort of figure that out. So that's one that's sort of prominent in my mind right now, but that I think is like helpful also for others to hear, because I that was something not coming from a business background that I had trouble understanding what marketing even was.
I love that analogy. So on this journey of getting to the point where it's, not a hurdle that you trip over anymore, you've clearly made some major progress in that. What do you attribute the ability to kind of make that mindset shift on marketing? How have you made some of the shift that you have so far?
I think really I used to always like want to hire like a firm to run our marketing. Like I kept trying to hire people to help, like hire somebody to help with an ad over here, hire somebody over here, hire somebody over here. And eventually I was just like, if I'm going to be able to hire effectively, I need to know what on earth this even is. Right. So I was just like, I've got to stop ignoring this. I need to like just take it upon myself to educate myself. And I was just chewing through books, just reading books, watching things, going to conferences, just really like just trying to like learn more so that like marketing could stop being some like mysterious thing. And then really kind of like that idea that it's like that marketing is the company, that is like everything. Like that was one of those like almost like spiritual, like realizations where you're like, the trees are God and God is the trees or something, like it's like where you realize that like everything truly is unified, that it's not something external. And I think that is, the constant pursuit of education, is something I think that every entrepreneur, like you have to just be sort of face blasting yourself with knowledge like constantly, because otherwise it's only a matter of time before you get complacent and then things start falling apart.
I really like that. Yeah, it's such a big piece that if you're watching this later on, definitely take that note of, there can be things in business that feel kind of like the boogeyman. Like I'm not necessarily afraid of it, but it's daunting. It's out there. Like I just don't know. But the more you learn about it, doesn't mean that you have to do it all the time, but learning enough about it that you can kind of break it down and be like, oh, this is how this works. It's not, such an unknown anymore. That education piece is so important. So when you look at, say, the next 3 to 5 years, I do want to be respectful of time, so I got this question, then we'll move into kind of some rapid fire stuff, that sort of thing. But when you look at the next 3 to 5 years, what are you looking forward to? Where's the business go 3 years out? Where do you see your role in the next 3 to 5 years? How did things adjust and shift as you continue to grow on this journey?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because it's like every time, I get to a point where I'm like, okay, I think we got to figure it out. Then the world's like, haha, it's like there's still more, So it's like, I'm never like too much of a, prognosticator, in terms of like, oh, this is our exact trajectory. This is our like plan. This is exactly what's going to happen. So I tend to be a little bit, more like take one day at a time, kind of person. But I can say that one thing I'm really excited about is just a recent change that we made in our sort of contract structure and like what we offer to authors. So historically, we just had like one sort of like feature, sort of like contract offering that we gave them. It was like,
Hmm.
this is the deal, like that's the deal, that's what it is, but we would always get people asking us two questions. One is, what are your packages? And we would always be like, well, we got this one thing, right? And then the second one was, I wish that your primary contract included more publicity,
Hmm.
right? And for all this time, like people would say these things, and I'd always be like, we got publicity over here. It's a separate thing that you can get. You can get it a la carte, and I would always try to like dodge these. And then finally, it's like I consistently am amazed at like how many times, something needs to be like blazingly obvious before it like is like, oh yeah, what a great idea that I should have had 2 years ago. And I think that that happens to like tons, like not just business owners, but like
Yeah.
everybody, right? They're like, what a great idea. That was so obvious. And so now we have these new packages, including publicity, and so that's something that we literally have just rolled out, within the last month. And I feel like it's a significant change for us, and I'm really excited to see where it goes because I feel like it's just getting closer to like the core of what our mission is, and is going to enhance author outcomes, is going to enhance like satisfaction, is going to hopefully give us like better like product market fit. So when I think about the next like few years, I'm just like, ooh, where's this going to go? Right? Like, what else? Is there going to be like another package that's even more robust that includes even more stuff? So I'm really excited just to sort of see where things go, on the trajectory that we have as we become more selective, as we, become, more dynamic, as we increase our footprint in the marketplace. And I figure, I'm going to be, sticking around to sort of see what happens with that, at least for the short term, and see what happens, with all of this, and try to help and see what sort of exciting stuff we can make.
That's awesome. I love the point on how many times you have to hear something where you finally take action on it. I literally was having that conversation about just like goal setting and how many times that many of us hear, hey, it's really important to actually write down your goals and look at them frequently, and it takes like 6, 7, 8 times before I'm like, oh, maybe I should actually do that, and it makes a difference. So it's crazy that little things like that can have an impact in life. So um well, I want to now shift a little bit to kind of some rapid fire questions. I've got 4 of them in total. They're meant to be kind of fun, pull out some additional really nuggets of wisdom for the audience, that sort of thing. So first one here, as you look at your journey so far through business, through academics, through kind of everything that you've been a part of so far, what would you say is your key to success?
Patience. I would say patience is a really key one, because a lot of times it's just going to take a minute for things to work the way you want to work. Patience with yourself, patience with your teammates, patience with your children. All of these kinds of things, I think, is really important, and that's like the reason I sort of emphasize that is just because it's a challenge for me, because I'm always like, I want it now. So I think it's important to keep that in mind and to keep perspective.
I love that. How about advice? If you could give just one piece of advice for other entrepreneurs or business owners out there, what piece of advice would you want to give them?
Just do it. I know, like, that's like kind of banal, but really, like, don't make excuses for why you're not doing it. Like, take the plunge. I mean, like I was talking about, having to get like hit with a 2x4 to like do things, to like figure out obvious things. Like, I had the chance to like do this company for years before I really actually started doing it in earnest. Like, the first Atmosphere book came out in 2015. I didn't really start doing it much until 2018. And it was
Mhm.
like, it was just there, and it was like there were opportunities. I was like, no, no, like, because I was just focused on something else, so it's like, just be open minded about things, and keep your eyes open.
I love it. Book recommendations. Usually I frame it up with what, one book that you're either currently reading or have read most recently. But I'll open it up bigger if you've got like one or two that you would recommend to the audience. And it doesn't have to be business related unless you want it to be.
Okay, yeah. So like as you can imagine, working in the in my field of my background, like I'm always reading like 7 books, right? So I could say from the business side, a series that I've been enjoying lately is the 100 Million series from
Hmm.
Alex Hormozzi. There's just a ton of stuff in there. That one is really super helpful. I've always got some business book I'm doing. Then I recently read A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. I'd read a ton of his stuff before, but I hadn't read that one yet. It's freaking devastating. And on the literary side of things, even more literary, contemporary literature, I would check out Mary Ruefle. There's a book she just came out with, and it is called The Book, of all titles. And it's like sort of weird little prose poetry pieces. It's the type of thing where if you're like a business person, you would never ever read this kind of book. And that's exactly why you should get it and read it, because it'll make your brain think in different ways.
I love that. Those are amazing recommendations. I can't wait to get those in the description, have everybody go and check them all out. All right, last rapid fire question, and then we'll kind of move on to my ending question for the day. And this one's just kind of fun. If you could choose just one area in your business, and you only get to choose one, that you could take a little bit of magic dust and you could sprinkle it all over that one spot and wake up tomorrow morning and it's 10 times better than it is today, where would you choose to put some of that magic dust?
Well, I said marketing was a dirty word. So maybe a specific part of it, I would put it on lead generation.
Mm,
That would be the one that, because of the difficulty. So it's like if you're selling a Mercedes Benz, right? You can sell a Mercedes Benz to anybody, right? As long as they are like over 16, right? Like you can sell a Mercedes Benz to anybody, right? All they have to have is the money, right? That's the one qualifier, right? But with book publishing, you have to have written a book,
mm.
right? Because there's that thing that is like a delimiter on the totable addressable market. It always makes lead gen super challenging because there are no Google filters, there's no Facebook filters that can like narrow that audience down. You're like always going to be like sifting for gold, in a place where there's a lot of sand, right? A lot of people who haven't written the book, right?
Yeah.
So that part is really challenging, because even if we have like a great message, a great sales process, a great product, great client satisfaction, just the fact that we have so much sand to get through, that part can be, really, really tricky. So if there was one part where I'd be like, is there a way that we can increase the gold to sand ratio by like just the slightest bit? That would make a world of difference, but I'm not counting on it.
I like that. And I think that's important for some other industries as well. There's a big piece of how do you deselect faster and more automatic, because your pool's so big in terms of just like general population that you can target online, and then yeah, there's a big piece of deselection that comes into play in that realm. Well, before we wrap up, for those that are in the audience that want to learn more, that want to connect with you, that want to keep up with all the amazing things that you all are doing, or maybe have written a book and want to have a conversation, where can we advise them to go for more information?
Yeah, so definitely atmospherepress.com. So if you have a manuscript that you'd like to be considered, we have a place on there that you can submit a manuscript. We also have, if you're just sort of like somebody who just started writing, you have a work in progress, you're not sure, you don't even know if you're like ready to publish, like that's sort of a like, I don't know if I can do it. We actually have this really awesome quiz on there. It's a publication potential quiz that walks you through 10 questions about, your writing, what you think about cool things like cover design or like an author network or like working with a team or whatever. And based on that, we'll give you like really specific, awesome feedback on what your next step should be. Even if you like haven't written anything, and you're never going to work with us, or whether you're somebody who should seek traditional publishing or should self-publish or whatever, any of these things, it's a really great resource. So yeah, on atmospherepress.com, that's a great thing. We got a awesome newsletter where we do like book giveaways and all sorts of other great stuff that you can sign up for there as well.
Amazing. And for those that are watching, I'll be putting this in the video description below. So as soon as we wrap up, go click the links, go check it all out, get some phenomenal information there. Make sure you reach out and say hi, all that fun stuff. So, Nick, as we wrap up, I always like to end on one very specific question. That is simply, what is most inspiring to you today?
Yeah. So today I find inspiring, and this is going to sound slightly corny, but just kind of the beauty of the world as a whole. So I say that because, in Texas, it's been like 105 degrees for like 6 months or 6 years. I don't know. It's hard to tell. And just sort of the fall coming along, and just sort of getting this sort of renewed opportunity to engage with nature. Like I find that always to be, really sort of rejuvenating, and something where you can see the trees, out in the world and get out there and be a part of it. Because I think as business owners, it can be a real life eater, right?
Hmm.
Uh, so being able to, sort of engage with the outside world, there's no, and like great writers all the way back to Thoreau and Emerson and such, like have talked about the magic of walking around in nature to get the mind going. So even for your work ideas, you'll get more of them if you go out there.
I love that. And yeah, I couldn't agree more, with the, it's been so hot, maybe 6 years or however long it's been of just like straight 100. It's hard to get outside when it's that hot. And it's just been amazing to get out and just feel the breeze again. And it's, comfortable and fun. And it just opens up so many different pathways in the brain. And it's really cool. So, Nick, I want to say thank you for taking the time, sitting down with us, sharing a bit of your story about, the amazing business you're building, that sort of thing. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.